How do I restart? Maadzong haponin jong tanan. 20 years ago, before I became all that, what Dr. Mosqueda has introduced me, before I developed my vaccine for PRRS, before I became president of both the Veterinary Association and the Drug Company Association of the Philippines, or before I even dreamt of winning or becoming a awardee of the 10 Outstanding Young Men, I was probably like you. There are 20 of you, most probably students, mga probinsyano, Tikag Bohol, nasalaag dito sa UP Los Baños, and on a power of a state scholarship program, was just trying to survive. You know, yung mga estudyante tayo, minsan, my biggest regret was when I was a student, I wasn't as critical thinker as I should have been right now. You know, maintaining a scholarship program, ang gusto lang nako dito is mapasar or ma-perfect ang mga exam para ma-maintain yung scholarship. You know, we get to memorize without really understanding the flow, the disease patterns. They call it pathogenesis, they call it epidemiology in disease control. Until you graduate and you realize when you enter the real world, wala ka palang alam, di ba? And it's okay. We are a testimony that sometimes really you really become just enforced to execute right after graduation. Not that I'm saying you have to do it my way, but if you probably, as I'm the reason now, right after graduation, I realized na hindi ko pa naiintindihan yung porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome. When I was a student, you know, at that time, ang mga sakit ng baboy ay hog cholera, parvovirus. They were perfect viruses. You know, you get infected, the pigs across the population gets infected, recover, and then there's a vaccine, very easy to execute, almost 90% efficacy within the population, and then the problem is solved. But in the 1990s, when I was a veterinary student at the UP Los Baños, PRRS changed everything that we understand about immunology and about epidemiology. Suddenly, nung ako ay nagpa-practice na, no, as a young veterinarian, field extension veterinarian in many provinces in Luzon, hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit may mga baboy na hindi na i-infect kahit naghahalika na sa kapwa-infected na baboy. Hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit may mga super shedders and may mga non-shedders. At hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit ang vaccine ng PRRS din ay walang cross-protection. Bakit hindi siya kagaya ng ibang mga sakit na madali lang i-solve across population. And then I realized that because hindi ko siya naintindihan and there was an opportunity for me to go on a Fulbright program, I realized na baka pwede na ako magseryoso. Pwede ako magseryoso. When I arrived in Minnesota, suddenly, kahit yung simple na pagpipit, hindi ko alam. When all my classmates at the graduate school of the University of Minnesota were so experienced and expert in protein analysis, in sequencing, DNA and RNA-based pairs, ito ako, Pilipino, ni pagpipit, nahuhulog pa lahat yung pipets ko. Kasi nung panahon namin noon sa UP, wala naman kaming ganong experience. And so, I realized na papag-iwanan ako doon sa College of Minnesota. And so what I did was, you know, try to, you know, pag Pinoy naman kasi, dalawa lang ang klaseng Pinoy, yung matalino at saka yung magaling. Doon ako sa magaling. Para humabol ako sa mga kasama ko, abay, tinuturuan ko sa mag-English. Ako gumagawa ng kailang mga manuscript in English, tapos turuan na nila ako paano mag-molecular sequencing o yung mga molecular work para lang makahabol ako. And I realized, sana kung mas maaga ako, baka hindi masyadong mahirap para sa akin. And that is the wisdom I'm going to share with you today. Because 20 years after the last devastating outbreak called porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus, now, 20 years after, parang ganun pa rin ang nangyayari. Nagsisimula pa rin tayo sa uno. Hindi pa rin tayo, well, up to now, hindi pa rin tayo ganun nakakaintindi about molecular diagnostics and epidemiology. At the Philippine forefront, we still could not isolate the virus nor characterize it. That's why when we were discussing this with the organizers, we were saying, I'm going to tell this as engagingly as possible so that you can find your niche in the future in terms of research opportunities, research gaps, or probably execution in understanding and execution of programs. Saan tayo magli-learn? Because ang dami kong learnings when we were trying to program ourselves to control ASF. Ang dami kong sana 20 years ago itong ginawa ko. Sana nung nasa Minnesota ako, nagdala na ako kasi pinapadala ako ng mga cell culture noon ng professor ko eh, no? At parang at that time kasi I thought okay lang, no? But there are a lot of things that I'd like to share with you today. And so with that preview, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat, maadjong hapon otro. I'd like to thank Xavier University Ateneo de Cagayan College of Agriculture for this invitation, together with the CHED iSafe program, Innovating and Strengthening Agri-Food Entrepreneurship Education for Mindanao's Inclusive Development. Of course, through the Office of San Miguel Foods Inc. and BMEG Feeds dyan sa Northern Mindanao, through the Office of Miss Flor Dacudao. Thank you for this invitation. And hopefully, yung mga frustrations ko na hindi ko na-execute 20 years ago ay maibahagi ko sa inyo today. I know that hindi lang mga taga Xavier o mga taga Northern Mindanao colleges and universities ang audience natin today. I was told the last time that there are colleges and students from Luzon and also from Visayas. So Tagalogin natin ito, but let's make this fun. Let's make this very millennial and let's make very simplified para hindi kayo antukin ngayong 2:00 ng hapon na ito. Alright, so para doon sa mga nawawala at ngayon lang pumasok, ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon ay yung kwento ng African Swine Fever sa Pilipinas at ano yung naging epekto nito sa ating industriya. Yung inyong industriya na papasukan kung estudyante pa lamang kayo ay ang agrikultura, no? Ang mundo ng kababuyan at ang mundo ng food animal sector or yung ating food security challenges na na-experience ngayon dahil sa African Swine Fever. I'd like to share my screen. Hopefully, personal natin itong may bahagi sa inyo. I couldn't see you, so I'll try to just smile at you. Kunwari, nakaharap ako sa inyo. So that's my presentation today. Sa mga nakapanood nung Wednesday, sabi ng organizer, ulitin ko daw. So I'll start with, hindi bago ang African Swine Fever sa mga baboy. At hindi ito bago sa mundo. Ang tagal na nito. This was originally, it was first experienced as a pig infection in the early 1900s in the sub-Saharan Africa. 1900s pa itong pumapatay ng mga baboy sa Africa, and its full characterization happened in the 1930s in Africa. Baboy lang amongst all the species ng hayop ang nagkakasakit at nagkakaroon ng simptomas, nagkakaroon ng mga clinical signs at nagkakasakit sa African Swine Fever. Walang ibang may receptor na ganito ang clinical signs na animal species. There is a mechanical vector of soft ticks, the Ornithodoros ticks, but they are mechanical vectors, meaning they carry the disease, they carry the virus, but they don't get infected. But because they're mechanical carriers, they infect other pigs. But itong mga arthropods na ito, itong Ornithodoros ticks na ito ay wala ito sa Pilipinas, ito ay nasa South Africa lamang. So, kung ikaw ay mukhang baboy or sing laki or sing taba ng baboy, huwag kang matakot, hindi ka tatamaan ng African Swine Fever kasi hindi ka naman talaga baboy. Alright? So, baboy lamang nagkakasakit at wala pang tayong scientific records na ito ay nagko-cross to other species, lalo na sa tao. So hindi ka magkakasakit sa African Swine Fever, pero ito ay napaka-devastating sa mga baboy. So in 1930s, it was characterized in Kenya by some missionaries who are also researchers. Paano ito kumalat sa buong mundo? In 1959 or in the 1960s, ito ay dumating sa Europe. There are documents na maaaring ito ay dahil sa mga ship, no, yung mga tourist vessels, ng mga hunters coming from Eastern Africa, Madagascar, Kenya, or yung doon kinasal si Brad Pitt at si Angelina Jolie, yung Namibia, because maraming mga tourists dito na nag-dock yung ship in Portugal, at ito ay napakain sa mga wild pigs in Portugal, no? And then from Portugal, it also happened in 1960s in Spain, and it's the start of emergence of African swine fever in Europe. Through drastic measures, through drastic depopulation program, na-eradicate ito ng Europe for 30 years, no? 3 decades. In the 1990s, ito ay na-eradicate in Europe except in an island in Italy. But basically, it was a long struggle of really aggressive depopulation control na wala ito sa Europe. Pero paano ito bumalik? The same story. Because we do not learn. In 2007, again, the same tourist ship, the same vessels that carries European tourists coming from Africa, landed or ship docked in Georgia. And then yung mga kaning baboy, yung tinatawag natin pasaw o lamaw sa Bisaya, ay napakain uli doon sa mga wild pigs in Georgia. And that's the start of the re-emergence of African swine fever in Europe. Now the question is, 2007 pa pala to, Doc. Bakit parang last year lang tayo nataranta? Bakit parang 2 years lang natin to pumasok sa ating mga discussions? Because, you know, coming from that eastern part of Europe, connected yan, going to Russia, pababa yan, is called a country called China. At alam naman natin na pag ang China ay nagkahatching, lahat ng mundo, lalo na ang Asia, lahat ng countries ng Asia, particularly Southeast Asia and the Philippines, who does a lot of trade with China, ay nagkakalagnat o nagkakasakit. Okay? Because in China, the first alarm raised by the FAO was actually in March of 2018. Tandaan natin, if you were following African swine fever, so parang storytelling lang to para hindi kayo antukin. Ang declaration, ang Chinese declaration na meron ng ASF was only in August of 2019. 2019 August. But the first incursion of African swine fever was actually more than a year before. Okay, so in March of 2018, nagkaroon na yan ng incursion in China, 2018. Klaruhin ko lang. In the Philippines, ang unang outbreak natin, ang unang break natin doon sa Rodriguez Rizal ay July-August of 2019. But in China, the first report outbreak was August of 2018. Alright? So mga a year after patay tinamaan, nung tinamaan ng China. But i-backtrack natin, hindi actually August, unang tinamaan ng China. The first incursion was in March of 2018. Maganda kasing matandaan natin yung lessons ng ibang countries or even lessons ng Northern Luzon so that we will know ano yung mga wisdom natin as we deal with our own breaks in Mindanao or our own control programs in Visayas or in our localities. So March 2018 ang unang incursion, the boundary of Siberia and China. Nandun yung unang identification that the African swine fever virus has come closer into China. Now, and then ang kwento nito, August lang sila nag-declare, okay? But weird yung declaration nila. No? Nasundan niyo ba yung kwento ng China? August 1, the first province that declared was hindi yung pinaka-border ng China to the north. Ang unang nag-declare ay yung middle part na ng northern territories ng China. Yung number 1, yung Liaoning province or yung Shenyang city. So parang nakikita natin, teka parang may gap in common sense. Kasi bakit nilukso ba? Nilukso yung number 1. Now the good thing with the Chinese technology is they already have characterization. So nahi-historical tracking na nila yung outbreaks nila, no? But the sad thing here is nung nag-outbreak ng first week, ang bilis-bilis pagkalat across sa laki ng China, parang fireworks yan na tumama. Sabay-sabay halos within 1 month yung outbreak. Hindi man lang nag-do re mi fa sol la ti do. Nag-chorus ka agad yung outbreak in China. And so there's something common sense here, especially if you're an epidemiologist. Meron tong hindi nakuwento ng maayos. Meron tong storya na maaring kulang sa awareness, kulang sa communication, ay nangyari parang sabay-sabay na lang lahat, no? Parang outbreak. Now, on the hindsight, nung inaral to ng mga researchers, na-realize nila na malaki palang naging problema sa China ay yung kakulangan ng awareness program, kakulangan ng education campaign program, which we're also seeing in how we're dealing with ASF now. Kasi, nung na-detect nila yung number 2 at yung number 2 na outbreak ay nandoon na sa mga areas in China, central part, na marami ng baboy. So ang hirap na i-control. Look at the mapping, the lesser the redness, mas kukunti ang baboy niyan. So yung number 1 at yung pinaka-northern part, yung mga northern part, kukunti lang ang baboy dyan. Pero nung nagsimula mag-outbreak yan doon sa Henan province na marami ng mga baboy, ang hirap ng makontrol. Now they realized that number 2, that's second week of August, at yung number 11, nung ma-characterize yung number 11, yung pinaka-northernmost part ng China, pareho lang yung strain. It's almost the same virus type, the same virus isolate. And they realized na baka pala, and most likely, yung number 11 pala, or yung pinaka-northernmost pala, yun pala ang pinaka-nauna, because in their tracking of their virus characterization, historical tracking, mas nauna pala, mas may age yung number 11, yung pinaka-northernmost part, and in their tracking, parang nangyayari pala yun, May pa of 2018. May, March incursion, walang nakinig. It wasn't even in the media. No? And China being it's a populist country, hindi nakatago yung information. Okay? So yung number 11 sana May pa pala yung nangyari, at yung number 11 nakukonti lang sana yung baboy, kung na-control sana yung kaagad, na-communicate sana yung kaagad, mataas sana yung awareness education, hindi sana tinakas yung mga baboy kasi out of not knowing anything about ASF. So nung tinamaan yung mga kukonting baboy sa northernmost part, yung border, the-diagnostic nila yung mga blood samples, pinatest sa baba, dun sa Liaoning province. Okay? Pinagbebenta sa baba, ginawang longganisa, ginawang chorizo, pinagbebenta down south. Kasi wala nang tao up north eh. So south yung market nila because they didn't know it was ASF. So the lack of education, the lack of campaign programs, the lack of awareness led to its becoming a fireworks na mahirap ng kontrolin. And so that is one of the learning that we should have focused. Okay? Now, ito na yung outbreaks. Now, then nung tumama ito sa China in August of 2018, na-alarm na tayo. No? Pumasok na ito sa news natin, nagmi-meeting na tayo together with other sectors of the government. As PVDA, alam ko, nag-seminar na ako noong October of 2018. Tapos, together with the National Federation of Hog Farmers, umikot na kami sa buong Pilipinas. Alam ko, nakailang beses ako dyan sa Mindanao, in Davao. And in fact, I was also invited in Bukidnon. And these are my materials. What I'm going to share with you today are my materials before palang tumama yung ASF sa Pilipinas. Because when it hit China, we already know na kukopyahin natin yung impact ng China. We will mirror its dynamics in China. So ano bang dynamics ng ASF in China? Nung tumama ito on the first month, ng August, September, na parang domino effect, no? It was antigenically, biologically, immunologically very devastating. It was economically damaging because it has the potential, kung wala kang gagawing control programs, it has the potential of killing 80% of your backyard pig population, yung small scale natin. And because of efficient biosecurity control amongst large farms, it can still penetrate 30% of the commercial pig farms. So the more na walang biosecurity program, the more susceptible. And unfortunately, China is like that. Okay? Well, China is heavily more modernized in their production system compared to the Philippines. ang tayo sa Pilipinas 65% backyard. So tayo yung mas susceptible. So in China alone, ito yung projection ni Dr. Stephen McOrist. If you know, Stephen McOrist is an Australian Australian epidemiologist and resource expert. Nakailang best sa Pilipinas, but right now Dr. McOrist works for at that time, no, he was working for the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service, and he projected that more than ASF being a animal health challenge in China and in many countries in Asia, and particularly in Southeast Asia, na pareho yung farming dynamics, pareho yung nagpapakain ng pasaw lamaw, mataas ang backyard, walang zoning, hindi strong yung zoning guidelines, di ba? Di ba? Alam naman natin dito sa ating Pilipinas, kahit saan ka mag-alaga ng baboy, parang okay lang. Ang hirap kang kontrolin kasi butante ka ni mayor, no? Hindi ka pwedeng, di ba? Hindi ka pwedeng pigilan. So, more than it being an animal health challenge, it is a global food security issue. It will be a global pork supply issue, and it will be a global pork price issue. Because in China alone, this is a projection. Again, before pa lang to tumama in the Philippines, it was projected that even if in 2017, ang production ng China is nasa 54 billion kilos of pork, mas mataas ang kanilang consumption, no? They are exporter of baboy, they will have a supply shortfall of 24 billion kilos of pork because 31 billion, at least 31 billion of kilos ang mawala sa kanila dahil nga mamatay due to African Swine Fever. And you project that the same epidemiological tracking to Vietnam, to Cambodia, and to the Philippines, nakikita na natin that Philippines alone will require this much pork. Ganito kalaking mawawalang baboy sa Pilipinas. Kaya nga noon, we were on guard because alam natin we are not ready to lose this much pork supply in the Philippines. Now, we have to understand din naman na hindi lang naman din Pilipinas ang tinamaan ng African Swine Fever. In fact, nung tinamaan ng China ng August of 2018, nauna pang tinamaan ng Vietnam. No? Tinamaan ng Vietnam ng February of 2019, nauna pang tinamaan ang Cambodia ng June 2019, at hindi naman siguro tayo mas magaling sa kanila, but at least na pumasok to sa atin nung July-August lang. Nung tumama ito sa Pilipinas, nung pumasok ito sa Rodriguez Rizal, nasa 6 to 9 million na nawalang baboy in Vietnam. No? But Vietnam is a bigger swine industry than the Philippines. Nasa 28.15 million pigs ang Vietnam, sa Pilipinas at in 2019 nasa mga 12.7 million lang tayo. But the story is the same. No? We were expecting the same challenge. Now, ano yung kwento natin dito, which we are experiencing right now? Magkukulang ang baboy sa buong mundo. Magiging mahal ang baboy sa buong mundo, ang lalo sa Pilipinas. Why? Because wala tayong mabilhan ng baboy. Okay? Alam na natin to 2 years ago. Sinabi na natin to sa mga seminars. It's exactly the same presentation. Kasi kahit pabilhin lahat ng China, ang lahat ng available na surplus export pork ng buong mundo, ng European Union, ng USA, ng Brazil, ng Canada, lahat ng mabibigay na sobrang baboy na yon will only accumulate around 8 billion kilos of pork. And China alone requires 25 billion kilos of pork. So kahit bilhin pa na lahat yung mga baboy na yan sa buong supplier ng other countries, China alone will require 16.5 billion kilos. So kung ganun kalaking requirement ng China, saan tayo bibili pag tayo naman ay dumadaan din ng pagkamatay ng ating mga baboy? So in-expect na natin to. Itong mataas na presyo ng baboy ngayon, kahapon sa meeting ng mga hog farmers, nasa 260 ng live weight ng farm gate price ng baboy dito sa Batangas. Kung 260 pesos ang farm gate price ng baboy, magkano na lang ang presyo ng liempo sa palengke? Sabi nga mas mahal na raw ang baboy kaysa sa beef ngayon. Okay? We forecasted this 2 years ago. Hindi lang we, but the global community forecasted this 2 years ago. So, in the Philippines, ito yung challenge natin, no? umayos tayo. Pag hindi tayo umayos at wala tayong gagawing border control programs, hindi tayo sumunod, hindi kayo tumigil sa pagpapakain ng pasaw o lamaw, pag hindi kayo natututong mag-execute ng level 1 biosecurity programs na ini-implement ng gobyerno at ng mga private sectors at ng mga LGUs, ito yung potential na wala sa atin. From 12.7 million population ng baboy in 2019, pre-ASF era natin, pwedeng mamatay ang 7.8 million pigs, of which 6.5 ay manggagaling sa backyard, kawawa naman tayo, and 1.5, almost 1.5 million ang mawawala from the commercial farm. Ang tanong, umabot na ba tayo sa 7.8 million pigs na nawala? Close to that. So there are a lot of failures, there are a lot of learnings, at ito yung sinasabi natin. Unfortunately, yung learning ko 20 years ago sa PRRS, na deja vu lang ngayon, and now sabihin ko na naman, sana yung mga learning na ito ay matutunan natin para in the next 20 years na meron namang ganito ka-devastating na outbreak, then we can execute na our learnings. Deja vu. But you understanding African swine fever, you future animal scientists, future epidemiologists, future nutritionists, future veterinarians, you have the opportunity to change the future out of this history. You know, because when more people understand and when more people are aware, then we're not gonna learn from our mistakes of the past. And so dumating na ang African swine fever. The first historical diagnosis of African swine fever was in Rodriguez, Rizal. I know you've been following as students. In Rizal, tapunan ng mga nagtitrade ng mga cut-ups ng mga karne ng baboy, yung mga tira-tira ng mga restaurants, yung mga hindi naubos na mga garbage from hotels and restaurants. In Rodriguez, Rizal, merong dump site doon na tinatapon ito at tinitrade ng mga mangalakal. At binibili ng mga babuyan, dahil may mga pasaw-lamaw binibili ito ng mga babuyan sa paligid noong dump site ng Rodriguez, Rizal. At sila yung unang nagpakita ng simptomas in July of 2019. Unfortunately, sa dinami-dami ng seminar natin, umabot tayo ng maraming towns and provinces in Visayas and Mindanao, ay hindi naman talaga mabilis makapenetrate ang information at hindi yan nakapenetrate doon sa Rodriguez Rizal na mga magbababoy, na mga backyard racers. Kasi nung unang tinamaan yung mga baboy nila, of course, wala siguro sa conscious nila ng African swine fever, and out of panic, pinagbibenta nila ito. Unfortunately, pinagbibenta na ito sa mga vejeros coming from Bulacan, coming from the north, coming from Central Luzon, na nandoon ang hog belt areas. Nandoon yung mga commercial farms. Well, nagsimula siya sa backyard, mabilis na kumalat siya amongst commercial farms. Maraming population, and may mga limitation tayo in terms of control programs, no? Which we will discuss later. So yung unang learnings natin ay nakapasok na ito in August of 2019. It was perfectly the way it was discussed. Hemorrhagic yung kaniyang septicemia, as you can see in the picture, which we will discuss later kung bakit siya hemorrhagic para dun sa mga estudyante na hindi pa masyadong nakapag-aral ng virology at ng pathology. Mataas ang fever, talagang mag-off feeding muna as it comes across population. Maraming nagsasabi sa akin na, Doc, hindi ganyan yung forma sa amin. Ngayon sa amin, off feeding lang tsaka hindi ka agad na mamatay isang buwan pa bago magsimulang mamatay. May nagsabi pa sa akin Doc, nung may mga konting namatay pero nabuhay ngayon napabreed ko pa Okay? This is a gap in research, and this is the reality of a population infection like pigs or poultry. Nagbabago ang dynamics. Yeah? If you are a veterinarian, alam natin na hindi na uso ngayon yung ano yung pathognomonic signs ng sakit na yan. Diba? Pag sinasabi natin salmonella yan, ang pathognomonic sign yan, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, wala na yan ngayon. Nag-iiba na ang dynamics ng isang infection as it enters subpopulation and population of pigs, no? Kasi ang dami ng factors nan eh. Again, another gap in research, no? I don't want you na di kahon mag-isip because yun nga, para kang ako, memorize yung clinical science. Nung pagkita ko sa real na babuyan, nag-iiba, hindi ko na siya ma-picture out kasi iba yung minemorize ko. Dapat critical sa atin yung processing natin of critical thinking. Things are not what they seem. Kasi while ito yung nakikita natin na picture in China, right now iba-iba na ang dynamics ng clinical signs of the infection. So be open-minded. Some of these are talagang nag-o-feed lang, hindi na mamatay, but when you run PCR tests, they are ASF. No? Some of these show halos walang hemorrhagic signs. Some of them just show parang pneumonia. And then when you do the PCR, ASF pala. No? So nagbabago na ito ngayon. But I'm just showing you, nung una itong na-report, ito yung book explanation, book clinical science, perfect bookish explanation and clinical science of African Swine Fever. Mabilis ang incubation period, no? At dahil mabilis yung incubation period, marami sa mga naunang outbreaks ang madali ang pagkakamatay ng mga baboy. Okay? Some say na in 48 hours, nagsisimula na mamatay yung mga baboy nila, or that's 2 days. And then in 10 days, naubos na yung mga baboy nila. But now, halos ikaw na lang maunahan ka na lang ng direction ng LGU na ikal mga baboy mo, halos wala pang signs yung mga baboy mo, except that they are PCR positive. So be open-minded of the dynamics in the clinical signs as it enters the population. Now, bakit ito, okay, question, bakit ito napakabilis pumasok sa katawan ng baboy? Bakit mabilis yung kanyang incubation period? Okay? And as far as we are concerned, researchers now still says hindi ito nadadala sa hangin. Okay? This is not aerosolized. Pero marami nagsasabing, hindi pa na-aerosolized yan, Doc eh. So far, wala pang study na yan ay kayang dalhin ng mga langaw. So far, yung perfect studies, meaning yung mga perfect inoculation tests using langaw or yung bangaw o yung mga species na malaking langaw, kaya mo ma-isolate doon sa kanilang mga bibig at sa kanilang mga katawan, no, coming from an inoculated with a virus. Pero yung perfect replication, no, like Coach postulates, na pag yung mga langaw na yan na PCR positive, pag nakapunta yan sa mga baboy na naive, no, walang ASF, hindi automatic may infect yung mga yon. So yun yung gap pagdating sa langaw. Pagdating sa rats, pagdating sa mga mice and other vectors, wala pang perfect studies. But coming from experiences, tingin ng mga tao, mas malaki yung likelihood na ang mga rats are strong vectors compared to langaw at mga lamok. Why hindi siya na-aerosolized? Hindi siya na-aerosolized kasi look at yung upper part, okay? Yung pinakamalaking virus, that is African Swine Fever. Yung sumunod na maliit, that's influenza. Yung mas maliit ay PRRS. Itong PRRS na ito kaya tong dalhin ng hangin. You know? You've learned of studies na yung malakas na wind pressure, yung wind gustiness ng wind ng flatlands of Canada, or from the northern Minnesota can go as far as Canada, nadadala yung PRRS virus sa hangin. Okay? We also know about yung tong mas maliit, itong FMD. We know that it can be carried through aerosol by kilometers. And lalo yung hog cholera, no? May mga documents noon of mga 72 kilometers to 80 kilometers kayang malipad yung hog cholera virus, no? So kung infected yung kabilang province, maaring tatamaan yung next na province kung hindi vaccinated o hindi protected yung mga baboy mo against FMD, against hog cholera, or even against PRRS. But not African Swine Fever. The longest document of an aerosolized, no, na namumove ng hangin is the one shared by John Carr. Now, when he was here, sabi niya, up to 3 meters lang ang kayang dalhin. Yung napaka mataas na viremia ng African Swine Fever, pag tinulak mo yan ng electric fan or ng wind, hanggang 3 meters na ang kayang liparin yan, again because of its weight. Sa sobrang laki niya, mabigat siya, no? Hindi siya kayang dalhin ng malayo sa hangin. So that's the only good thing with African Swine Fever. The rest ay works against our favor in terms of controlling African Swine Fever. One, bakit? Biologically, ito yung kanyang limitation. Okay? Biologically, itong makikita mo yung picture sa baba, ito yung may mga parang pula-pula na mga that's actually pag-i-encode, no? ng virus into the host cell. Biologically, it is very virulent because para itong drug lord. When you say parang drug, di ba, who are veterinarians here amongst the 29 of you? May mga veterinary students ba sa inyo? We know that for the virus, no, yung ating immunology, which minimorize ko lang yan dati, kaya wala akong maalala talaga. No? Kaya huwag kayong mag-memorize eh. Okay nang hindi nyo ma-perfect. Mga 99 lang, basta naintindihan nyo. And be critical when you study immunology. Tandaan nyo talaga yung ano yung posibleng magbabago, posibleng mangyayari. Be very critical thinkers. No? Things are not what they seem. Okay? For every viruses has a different story. Okay? Now, for other viruses, may mga 6 lang, the most 20 proteins that helps them penetrate into the host cells, into the receptors, but not for African Swine Fever. Sabi ko ay para itong drug lord. Okay? Uy, stress na. Para itong drug lord. Ang daming tumutulong sa kanya para makapasok. 165 proteins ang tumutulong sa kanya para makapasok dun sa host cell, no, ng baboy lang pinag-usapan natin kasi baboy lang ang host target cell nito para makapasok, and then within yung mga protein cells na yon, tinutulungan nila para wag mapatay ng B cell receptors at ng T cell receptors at T cells yung virus, tinutulungan niya ng mga proteins. Ang daming tumutulong sa kanya para hindi ma-acknowledge, para hindi mapatay, and worst, para i-replicate, no, and i-shed palabas, no? Hindi lang tinutulungan papasok doon sa loob para mag-replicate, nung na-replicate na tinutulungan para makalabas and will infect more pigs. So ganun kawais. Kaya sabi ko dati, kung tayo, yung utak natin bilang estudyante ay pa-chill-chill lang. Ganyan lang yan eh. Sagkolera lang yan, parang FMD lang yan, or parang parvovirus. No. Hindi pwedeng mas matalino sa atin ng mga viruses. Hindi pwedeng mas matalino sa atin ang sakit ng mga baboy. That's why as students, it's our role to be critical thinkers. It's our role to identify gaps in research and information. That's my challenge for you today. Now, the other problem is, for example, kung aware kayo sa porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus, yung mga viruses na yon, ang receptors nila, ang target cells nila, ay yung macrophages of the lungs, limited lang. Yung macrophages of the lungs and the reproductive cells. No, yung reproductive cells of the baboy, yung mga kaya nagko-cause ng abortion and pneumonia, but not African swine fever. Ang African swine fever replicates in every cytoplasm of every pig. And ano ba ang parte ng baboy na walang cytoplasm? Ano ba ang cell ng baboy nang walang cytoplasm? And the cytoplasm is within the lining of the endothelial cells. And endothelial cells lines the blood vessels. So it is an arbovirus. At alam natin na pag arbovirus yan, if it is sustained by blood ang pinakamatagal ma-desiccate. Ang viruses na nasusustain ng blood, nabubuhay sa dugo, ang pinakamatagal ma-desiccate na viruses. No? So that's why, lahat ng parte na may cell ay nabubuhay ang African Swine Fever, napakatagal pa lang ma-desiccate. You know what desiccate? Yung pinakamatagal mapatay. No? Kaya nga, ang African Swine Fever, within months, pag yan ay nasa dugo, pag yan ay nasa karne ng baboy, it will survive within months in room temperature. Pag natapon yan sa tae, because may endothelial cells pa rin doon sa feces na tinatain ng mga baboy, it survives for 11 to 13 days. Pag i-finraise mo yan, no? Okay? Pag i-finraise mo yan, it survives indefinitely. Na kahit na painitin mo yan, i-dry mo yan, it can survive for 300 days. Kahit na yung balat niyan, i-dry mo, survives for 300 days. Yung asinan mo yan, so i-salt mo yan, as long as hindi naluto at more than 30 minutes at a temperature higher than 70 degrees centigrade, maaaring buhay yung virus. That's how resilient the virus is because of its antigenic and because of its biological nature, which I described earlier. Di ba? Now, naintindihan nyo na kung bakit siya ganito kahirap i-control. Okay? Kwento-kwento lang yan. Kwentong bulanon lang ba? The same studies of FAO, ganun din ka-resilient yung African swine fever in terms of its survival in many surfaces, even at different pressures. Now, let's go to another problem of African swine fever, immunologically. So, challenge na siya antigenically, challenge na siya biologically, and immunologically, ito yung problema niya. Okay? Originally in Africa, it was just a type 1 African swine fever. But when it jumped into Europe, it became a type 2 African swine fever. And within type 2, there are many genotypes. So far, there are 23 different genotypes of African swine fever. Though yung na-characterize natin sa Philippines is closer to the Chinese strain, and the Chinese strain genotype is also closer to the Georgia genotype. The problem here is within genotypes, napakaliit ng kaniyang, which I will show you here. If you could look at the pictures on top, leftmost, to the left of you. If you do serological characterization, if you do genetic characterization of this virus using proteins on the surfaces of the extracellular particles of the virus, at P72, you will detect 30% of them. But if you come closer pa using P220 protein, every genotype, which in simplified terms lang para maintindihan natin, na kung posibleng yung genotype na maaring ma-isolate mo in Mindanao, for example, in Davao de Oro, at yung ma-isolate mo in the outbreak in Cotabato, they might be 25% or more different for each other. So anong impact nito if they are not molecularly different? No? They are hindi sila similar in terms of characterization. So yung protection, pag gumawa ka ng bakuna doon sa na-isolate mo sa Davao de Oro, yung ginawang bakuna doon might not be effective doon sa na-isolate mo in North Cotabato. Okay? So kung walang cross protection, walang enough cross protection ang ginawa mong bakuna, then it's a failure as a vaccine. That's why napakahirap gumawa ng bakuna against African swine fever. Sabi na nga natin, napakahirap nang hanapin yung kanyang epidemiological protein. Ang paggawa pa ng bakuna, ang hirap kunin yung kanyang surface protein that will give cross protection. And so far, there are three different vaccines under development. One is yung dine-develop ngayon sa Harbin Institute in China. They might be the first to come up with a vaccine, but gaano ka effective ito in terms of cross protection in all different genotypes? That's a question because wala pa namang report sila on their third level evaluation of their vaccine. There's one where we are interested to join in the evaluation, yung sa Peer Bright na bakuna. Again, hindi pa umabot sa level 3. And then there's one approved by USDA pero napakalayo pa in terms of development, probably distributed by 2, 3 or up to 5 vaccine companies. But again, malayo pa masyado sa level of development. And so it will take a while before an effective vaccine will be used to recover against African swine fever. So we really have to understand the virus so that our biosecurity can sustain until the vaccine development comes in. Okay? I hope you're following. Another gap in the research that I would like you to understand, ito na yung mga sinasabi ko dati na nung ako'y graduate, hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit may subpopulation ng PRRS. Bakit may subpopulation? Magkadikit na yung dalawang baboy, i-infect mo silang dalawa ng virus, yung isa maaring hindi tamaan, yung isa namang baboy, sobrang mag-shed. Okay? Hindi ko maintindihan na lahat ng 10 babakunahan mo, bakit may dalawang hindi i-infect mo? Bakit may dalawang hindi nagkakasakit? At bakit mayroong 3 na grabe kong manghawa? Okay? And that are the gaps. So that's why yung mga marami sa atin na hindi sanay sa scientific discussions, napakasarado mag-isip, ano yan? ASF yan kaagad. Yung dekahon mag-isip, yun ang delikado for a researcher. Yun yung delikado maging scientist. Kasi, dekahon mag-isip, hindi fluid mag-isip. Like for example, itong ASF contagiosity, hindi mo maintindihan itong ASF na sa napaka-infectious, napaka-pathogenic, no? Nung unang cases, no? Grabe kung pagkatinamaan talagang mataas ang percentage na mamamatay siya. Pero kapag nakapasok na siya within the population, ang bagal kumalat sa loob. Ano ang risk nito pag mabagal kumalat sa loob? Nagbibigay ng false hope? Parang paasa ba? Parang ikaw ba? Yung uya ba? Sige ka lang char-char. Tuod down po ng babae, hindi ka seryoso. No? Inaani ang ASF. Magsugod og kaigo, no? Kung depende sa iyong biosecurity, for example, ang imuhang tao, nagsugod ni sud, no? Ni uli gabi, nangansyon, wa nagpaybaw ni ikyas niya pagpangansyon niya sa pikas nga balay nakatunob siya og tae nga nay ASF o ni kaon ba og baboy na ASF iyang kamot whatever pagsud niya sa farm nagtrabaho siya dito sa for example grow out section or breeder section dito na ko nagsugod so bakit ani mo na clinical science usa duha pero dugay pa kay sa mukalat. This is one of the research gaps. Bakit ang bagal ng contagiosity? Okay? Nasa bagal ng contagiosity, ayaw mag-depopulate ng mga tao because they hope na wag mo namang patayin lahat ng mga baboy. Mahal naman yan. Millions of worth yan. Dalawa lang naman ang may sakit. Bakit yung buong 10,000 ko ay patayin mo lahat? That's a challenge. Okay? Because we keep on hoping na mabagal naman ang ano nito, contagiosity nito. Baka naman hanggang dyan lang yung tama. We can still save the rest. And that's where yung tinatawag nating selective culling or tooth extraction comes in place as a proposal. I'm not promoting it, but it's what other countries have been recommending. But may mga limitations lang din doon, which I will not complicate you guys because we just want you to understand African Swine Fever. Kumpara sa ibang sakit like FMD, okay? Si FMD, may isang tinamaan, ang bilis kumalat. Pero walang mamamatay. No? Yun nga lang, napaka-limiting siya sa trade. Kasi may mga sugat-sugat yung ilong, yung nguso, may mga sugat-sugat yung paa, napaka-ugly, no? Napakataas ng culling. And it's also very, very infectious kasi mabilis kang kumalat. That's why it's a trade barrier. Or to have cholera. Si hag cholera naman, depende sa level of vaccination. Kung hindi ka talaga bakunado at matapang yung strain mo, talagang papatayin yung may mga nahawaan niya. Pero kung may bakunado ka naman, maaaring they will be sustained. But mataas pa rin yung kanyang pathogenicity. For ASF, kakaiba. Okay? Mabagal ang tama sa loob, pero once tinamaan ka na, 90% chance mamamatay ang baboy na yan. Which nag-iiba na naman ngayon. Base doon sa mga sinasabi na, hindi yan totoo, Doc. Sa akin talaga, Doc, hanggang ngayon, 6 months, nabuhay pa yung naunang tinamaan dati. Which is scary. Because that means, as long as nandoon yung mga survivors na yon, they have the potential to shed and infect other pigs within the population. So mag-antay ka ng isang stress dyan, puputok na naman yan, then you have to deal again with another outbreak. Okay? Rebreaks of infection. Another research information that also offers other windows for you to research ay yung kanyang probability of infection o yung kanyang epidemiological flow. Kasi, di ba ang kwento ng marami, hindi siya naladala sa hangin. In fact, kapag kami wall yung babuyan mo, hindi nakaka-infect yung kabilang side ng baboy doon sa other side kasi may wall. Kasi nga hindi nadala sa hangin eh. So kapag kami wall yan, pag maganda ang biosecurity mo, hindi nahahatid manually, hindi na nadadala physically nung tauhan, nung tsinelas, nung sapatos, maaring hindi ma-infect yung kabilang wall. Because it will take at least 10,000 virus particles para ang baboy ay ma-infect ng African Swine Fever. That's the threshold of the viral dose. Okay? So kailangan yung nakain niya is more than 10,000 virus particles para siya magkasakit. Okay? But kapag ka natapon yan sa tubig and becomes mixed in the water sources, only 100 virus particles in even as small as 100 ml of water. Makalagok lang yung baboy mo ng isang gush ng tubig, binaha dahil inulan, galing sa kabilang babuyan, napunta yung virus, isang lagok lang, 100 ml lang. Or yung river, you share the same river, and yung kabilang part ay tinamaan, napunta sa river yung viruses, nainom yan ng konti ng baboy mo. Kasi ang pinapanlinis mo sa babuyan mo ay galing din doon sa river water, then most likely just 100 virus particles in a measly 100 ml of water can infect the pigs. Ganun ka-potent na mga hawa ang water sources. So, nangyayari in Luzon na pagka namatay yung mga baboy nila, nililibing lang kung saan-saan yung mga baboy without using chemicals, without using yung sako para hindi mag-leak, no? Yung hindi mag-leak yung viruses doon sa patay na mga baboy, that gets into the water basin, okay? And gets mixed into the water sources of other pigs, okay? Or in the drainage, okay? Like in many cases in Bicol, where they share the same water sources coming from drainage and rivers, mabilis kumalat. Because once it gets to the water, hindi na totoo yung 100 or 10,000 virus particles. Okay? So, yun yung mga research information and gaps na nakikita natin. Now, bakit ito kumalat sa Pilipinas? Nakwento ko kanina, doon nagsimula siya sa backyard pigs in Rodriguez, Rizal. Naunang kinalat ito ng mga biyahero doon sa Bulacan, doon, umabot pa nga ito doon sa maraming lugar sa Pangasinan, yung mga biyahero, at doon nag-start yung risk. Binili nila yung mga baboy na infected, napakain sa mga hito, in turn doon sa mga hito ay lumalangoy sa tubig na doon din kumukuha ng panghugas doon sa mga babuyan. Yun yung mga kwento. Yung mga kwento na yung mga tao, no, galing sa kabilang towns, yung mga technicians, yung mga veterinarians, yung mga kotse nila coming from another farm, entered into another farm, gets breaks. Yung mga panahon nitong tag-ulan in Central Luzon, pagka umulan ngayon, bukas or 2 days after, marami ng breaks because again, water sources are being shared in mga babuyan na magkakalapit, no? Magkakalapit ng mga babuyan. Some says it's the mga pesting rats, no? As mechanical carriers, but really many of them are also like in Cavite, yung kwento sa Cavite na nagpapakain ng kaning baboy, pasaw-lamaw, at yung mga kwento na yung mga infected na mga baboy ay ginagawang longganisa at napakain sa mga baboy and starts the outbreak. The problem then is tinamaan yung mga maraming baboy sa Pilipinas. Again, just like in China. We did not learn from China. We did not maximize our learning from China. Yung mga dark red na yan yung mga Pampanga, Tarlac, Nueva Ecija, Bulacan na maraming baboy. And so pag doon ka nagsimula sa maraming mga baboy, in many commercial farms na wala namang pambayad ang gobyerno, it will be a challenge for you to execute them to cull their pigs. Kasi nga, walang support eh. So, hindi naman lahat ng mga tao ay mabait. Marami ding mga pasaway. And mahirap din silang i-blame because these are everything that they have. No? Even sa backyard. No? This is everything that I have. Tapos kukunin ng gobyerno, hindi naman ako sure kung ASF ito. Kasi nga, another challenge, napakahirap magpa-test. Napakamahal magpa-test. Diagnostic tools is a challenge. Which which makes me, di ba, introduce ako ni Engineer Chari, Engineer Mosqueda, that I developed a field-based test kit for African Swine Fever. Now, for some reasons, hindi ko siya pwedeng ma-produce in the Philippines because it is patented in Northern and Central America. So yung mga ganon, no? Yung mga ganong mga sayang. But then, it's about time. No? We need a lot of developments and research on field-based diagnostic kits, and even to commercialize further para bumaba yung presyo and services ng ating diagnostic technology, particularly PCR. Other challenges na experience natin is yung National Control Program implementation, especially with the local government. No? Yung coming from the national programs, hindi ma-harmonize kaagad pagdating sa baba with different local government execution. Another challenge is yung again, walang magsusumbong na may tama. Okay? Walang magde-declare. Kasi nga, pag nag-declare ka, automatic kukunin yung mga baboy mo. And of late, may mga nagsasabi na may maraming hindi pa nababayaran. I'm sure siguro late lang yan nabayaran. But syempre, yung kwento-kwento niyan, sinakyan na yung mga bahero, sabihin nila, oy, matakot kayo. Pag hindi nyo pa binenta sa akin yung mga baboy na yan, kukunin ng gobyerno yan, di kayo babayaran. Syempre, mga lies yun ng mga bahero para lang magpanik at mabenta ng mura. Umabot yung presyo ng baboy sa Luzon kasagsagan ng outbreak ng 30 pesos per kilo na lang. Almost pinamimigay na lang yung mga baboy. No, para lang kumita, and yet di naman bumaba yung presyo ng baboy sa palengke nung halos pinimigay ang baboy. Ganun siya nasakyan, no, ng mga nagte-take advantage of the situation. Another control program is yung incentive sa mga magre-report. Okay, minsan yung mga nagre-report, yun pa yung penalize. Ikaw na ngayon nag-report, ikaw na ngayong honest, ikaw pa yung binugbog ng mga tao. Kasi kung ikaw yung unang nag-declare, ikaw yung sabihin, ikaw yung panimula ng outbreak. Kahit naman, nauna pa yung iba na hindi lang nag-declare. Natamaan ka rin lang ng ibang farm kasi ikaw yung nag-declare, ikaw yung first suspect, kawawa ka. Okay? Another issue ay yung, of course, yung pagkalat ng mga infected na mga baboy na hindi tested, akala nila hindi infected kasi nga wala pa namang signs, pero carrier na pala yun nung nilabas. Kaya nung nilabas yun, pagdating sa slaughterhouses, pagdating sa karne, tainted na yun ng ASF yung mga baboy nila. Of course, media scare was also another problem kung bakit lalo nagbebenta yung mga backyard lalo. Kasi nga natakot sa media. And of course, some of the government lockdowns ng LGU has promoted not only protection but protectionism. No? Masave lang yung kanila, bahala na yung iba, no? Parang ganun nangyayari. And so, yun yung mga learnings natin kung bakit kumalat ang African Swine Fever across the country. So, we're monitoring that, the outbreaks. Nagsimula yan, again, July of 2019. Yellow yan, ang coding ng yellow ay Southern Luzon kasi ang Rizal in the region is part of Region 4A. So, Southern Luzon. Southern Tagalog yung unang outbreak ng Rizal. But again, ang bumili ng mga baboy ay nanggagaling sa Bulacan, Pangasinan, and all. So, mabilis ang pagkalat within the blue zones. Yan yung North Luzon. Now, kaya ko sinasabing a year after, kasi kung titignan mo sa February of 2020, nakikita nyo ba sa graph? Yung gray na yan, that's when it was reported sa OIE na tinamaan ang Mindanao, particularly in Davao de Oro. So, 1 year almost na ang outbreak in Mindanao. But I'd like to give my respects to people in Mindanao na hindi ganon, no, kalaki, which I will show you later, yung tracking natin. Hindi ganon kabilis ang pagkalat ng African Swine Fever in Mindanao compared to how it was experienced in Luzon. Of course, magkaiba yung geography, magkaiba yung production dynamics, but still a lot of credit goes to how Mindanao has executed their border controls and their biosecurity programs. So, noong kasagsagan ng 2020, nagkaroon tayo ng African Swine Fever Recovery and Repopulation Campaign. Sinasabi na natin na, teka lang, ayusin natin ang ating mga baboy kasi darating ang time ngayong 2020 na huwag kayong magpanik. Ngayon lang yan, lalo na yung mga nag-downsize. Yung nag-downsize meaning natakot lang. In fact, 5% of the population in Visayas nagkatay ng mga baboy kahit wala namang ASF in Visayas, sila takot lang. So sinasabi natin, okay, matakot, okay? Nakikita natin sa graph na to na yung mga tinatamaan ng ASF, ano lang, short time lang yun, short term lang yung pagpapanik, kasi nga natatakot lang, ibibenta nila ng sabay-sabay. Pero after ilang months, dahil magkukulang yung baboy, tataas yung presyo ng baboy. In fact, yung tracking natin in 2021 May, aabot ng, napaka-understated pa natin, no? Bandang August of March of January of 2021, iinisip natin 125 to 135 ang presyo ng baboy. Ngayon 260 na. So sinasabihan na namin, this was a material in 2019 pa na please improve your biosecurity, huwag tayong matakot. Of course, easier said than done. Pera nila to eh. So kung natakot sila, kasi kesa naman, di ba, matamaan sila, nagbenta na. But there's value in understanding. There's value in improving your biosecurity because the impact of all this, as we've campaigned noong 2018 pa lang, ay magkukulang ang baboy sa Pilipinas by, again, understated tayo noon. Akala natin 20% lang. But ngayon, nasa 28 to 30% na ang kakulangan ng baboy sa Pilipinas. At akala natin, nasa 135, in Luzon, 145 lang itataas ng presyo ng baboy. Ngayon, 260 na yan. 245 to 260 na yan. So, ang laki ng opportunity natin, had we strengthened our protocols, strengthened our biosecurity, at kung hindi sana tayo natakot at binenta yung mga baboy natin, sana kumita tayo ngayon. And that's also a way going forward. We do not have to live in fear, because just like how China has recovered even without vaccine, just like how Vietnam has recovered even without vaccine, we can recover with a good biosecurity program. We just have to learn from how we broke in the first place and how we can improve our biosecurity protocol, then we can still earn in the future. So, ilan na ba nawalang baboy sa Pilipinas hindi naman year to date, December of 2020, January na ngayon eh. So, ongoing itong tracking na ito. Okay, this was presented during our last government meeting, noong PICAF meeting noong Wednesday. So this is the latest data. Hindi to yung lahat ay namatay dahil sa ASF, kasama na dito yung mga natakot, yung mga nagbenta, nag-downsize ng kanilang population kasi natakot na tamaan. So year to date, nasa 38% na ang nawalang baboy sa Pilipinas. Natandaan mo yung forecast natin noong wala pang ASF, sabi natin mga nasa 50% to 60%, no? That's around 7 million. Ngayon at 38%, we are estimated to have lost 5.5 or around 5.6% na 5.6 million ang nawalang baboy sa Pilipinas. Imagine. 5.6 million na ang nawalang baboy sa Pilipinas. Again, that's not tinamaan ng ASF, lahat-lahat na yon. The stigma, the fear, the takot, okay? Of that 5.6 million or 38%, 60% na population na wala in whole of Luzon. Okay, nandun yung latag ng population across regions. In North Luzon, ang pinakamalaking tama, as you've seen in the graph kanina, 71% na of the population in Northern Luzon ang nawala, or that's around 4 million of pigs in Northern Luzon. In South Luzon, 40% na ang nawala, that's almost 1.2 million of pigs ang nawala. Again, Visayas, wala pang ASF in Visayas. Sana manatiling wala sa Visayas. We're tracking Visayas now. Yung 5% na yan o yung 130,000 na nawala in Visayas, hindi yan tinamaan. That's again out of fear, downsizing. Now sa Mindanao, there are estimated of 283,000 ang nawala, of which marami dyan ay nanggagaling dun sa 203,000 ay nanggagaling sa maraming downsized, takot dyan sa Southern Mindanao. And dyan sa inyo sa Northern Mindanao, again, marami din dyan ay downsized, 5% yung natakot. At just a little over 0.2% ang talagang, siguro yun yung Surigao population, tsaka yung Iligan population, yun yung recorded. So, kumpara sa Luzon, na naka 1 year na tayo na outbreak sa Mindanao, hindi ganun kabilis ang pagkalat in Mindanao compared to how it was experienced in Luzon. Kung malito kayo, yung taas na graph, that's just the tracking, no? Itong taas, ito yung tracking namin in October, end of October. Then itong baba, itong mas malaki, yung tracking natin end of December. Okay? So, may impact na yan sa population ng nawalang karne. So far, nasa 28% na ang nawalang karne because of that population loss. I'll just be quick because mag-aalas 4 na. Ano mga learning natin? No? And hopefully, ito din yung maiiwasan natin dyan sa maraming control programs na i-execute natin in Mindanao. Number one, really control viajeros. You really have to control viajeros. In many towns in southern Luzon now, hindi na pwedeng dumidiretso kung saan-saan ang mga viajeros. Meron lang silang trading center. Meron na silang sentro kung saan pwedeng bumili ng baboy. At di na sila pwedeng pumunta dun sa iba-ibang mga towns, parts ng towns. So centralized yung buying and selling para maiwasang maglakad-lakad yung magbiyahe yung viajeros across. Of course, other programs are yung pagko-control ng disinfection, yung mga checkpoints na talagang thorough yung disinfection ng mga trucks ng mga viajeros. Tapos bibigyan ka ng ticket bago ka makalusot. Make sure na nag-comply ka dun sa protocol ng disinfection. Okay? So other like in Baguio and in many, they have centralized their buying and their selling. They've improved a lot in their backyard operations. Yung may mga areas na very hindi na execute yung quarantine programs. Of course, a lot of this ay nasa kamay na ng LGU. May mga iba talagang halos wala. Like in many lugar sa Bicol, may mga nagsasabi, Dok, wala talagang quarantine dito sa amin. Wala talagang checkpoints. Wala talagang, or yung checkpoint namin parang humahalik lang yung disinfectant, yung tubig. Hindi inaayos yung gulong. Yung mga ganon. Or Dok, walang tumitingin talaga sa mga sasakyan. Diba? May mga kwento in Northern Luzon na talagang tinatago even sa loob ng makina yung mga baboy, yung mga karne ng baboy. Sa loob ng van, tinatago balde-balde yung mga karne ng baboy. At walang tumitingin kasi ang tumitingin lang yun ng mga biyahero lang ng mga trucks. Pero sa mga private cars, walang tumitingin. Kaya nakakalabas yung mga tainted na mga baboy. Okay? Walang incentives for reporting. Okay? So again, takot mag-report kasi nga, pag nag-report ka, persecute ka. Kukunin lahat yung mga baboy mo. And within 1 kilometers or within 500 meters, kukunin yung mga baboy mo. Kawawa ka, kailan ka pa mababayaran? No? Lalo na ngayon, no? May mga delays. Of course, may mga protocol talaga, but kung ikaw, ito lang yung pera mong pang-graduation kay Inday or pang-kasal kay Undoy, di ba? Will you report it? Or ilitsyon mo na lang or ibenta mo na lang ng patingi-tingi? That's the risk. Okay? So, ngayon, there are a lot of adjustments in the protocol. Ngayon, tulong-tulong na hindi automatic kukunin yung baboy within the zone. Hindi yung automatic call, hold, and locate, call, and hold. Hindi automatic. Pag nag-run ng epidemiological test, pag negative naman yung ibang mga babuyan sa backyard, hindi automatic kukunin. Yan yung mga campaign kahapon na report ng maraming lugar sa South Luzon. Testing support, di ba? Parang, paano kami makaka-support? Paano namin malalaman na yung mga tubig namin ay hindi contaminated? Paano namin malalaman na yung mga babuyan namin dito ay walang ASF? Wala naman kaming testing. Saan ba kami magpapatest? Ano bang protocol for testing? Hindi alam ng mga LGU namin paano mag-test. Di ba? Yung mga ganong concerns. No? So, yun yung mga kailangang i-execute natin. Of course, transparency. In fact, may kwento nga kami na, yun, kami yung unang nag-report, na-persecute kami. Kasi kahit nauna naman yung bahay namin, pero tinago nila, kami nag-report, kami na-persecute. Mga ganun yung kwento ng marami. So, we have to give incentives in reporting. Kaya nga, we're pushing now with efficient testing and compliance to the protocol, yung selective culling. Kasi pag isa kang malaking farm, tapos tinamaan ka, and alam mo na may chance ka mag-selective culling, i-declare mo yon, okay? Pero you do your protocol of testing para ang yung positive lang, yun yung talagang parts, yun yung population ay kakalmo. Pero pag na-prove naman na yung ibang mga buildings mo ay negative sa ASF, you can still sell them. Hindi ka talagang automatic lugi. So, hindi ka matakot isugbong kasi hindi naman automatic lahat yung area mo. So, yun yung mga areas of development na pinag-uusapan namin. Now, anong effect nito so far? Okay? So far, last year, ang impact nito, remember, 38% ng nawalang baboy, So again, that's 5.6 million na walang baboy. So again, in the supply and in the prices, alam niyo na yung impact niyan. 260 ng presyo ng live weight at wala ka nang harvest, no? Maliliit na mga harvest mo ngayon kasi nga marami nang nawalang baboy. May impact yan sa feeds. Wala nang kakain ng feeds. So yung mga nagnenegosyo ng feeds, kung kayo nagtatrabaho sa feed companies, marami na sa inyo ang nagda-downsize ng operation, maraming mga small feed millers ang nagsasarado, no? In fact, in Luzon, last year pa doon, hindi pa na tayo nakapag-update ng impact nito sa 2020, pero 30% na nawalang volume ng hog feeds for Luzon, and 15% in Visayas, 10% in Mindanao. Again, sa takot, no? Maraming natakot kumain ng baboy. Lalo ngayon mahal. Sabi nga kahapon ayaw na namin yung mga nagtitinda sa palengke. Ayaw na namin bumili ng baboy kasi tumal mahal na Wala nang bumibili. In fact, this is bad, but mas gusto namin yung imported kasi nakakabili kami ng tingi-tingi. So kung ano lang yung tinging mabili namin, yun lang din yung pwedeng ibenta namin. Hindi katulad pag buo yung binibili namin sa mga vihero, wala nang bumibili. Kami mahirap ang magbenta ng mga parts kasi force na bumili. Mga ganong, it has affected our intake of pork consumption. Lalo yung kasagsagan ng outbreak, di ba? Takot kumain ng mga baboy nung kasagsagan ng outbreak. Again, out of miscommunication. So, 36% nang nawala, mataas na yung, again, 250 na yung ating farm gate prices. And nung pagmahal ng presyo ng baboy, syempre, ganun din ang impact nito sa ibang commodities. Nagmahal din ng manok. Okay? Kasi lilipat Nagmahal na rin yung isda, no? Nagmahal na rin yung itlog. Kasi nga, hindi naman automatic yan na the demand also for the other commodities will also increase. No? So, halos ngayon lahat mataas na, di ba? Sweldo lang natin ang mababa. Allowance lang natin sa ating mga magulang mababa. Can we access imported pork? Kahapon pinag-uusapan yung pag-double ng MAV volume. Pero can we get clean pork? Kung sabi nga natin China alone, binibili lahat ng baboy. How expensive can we also get prices from imported? And pag nilagyan pa yan ng tariff rates, competitive din ba? And as a totality, anong impact nito dun sa ating per capita consumption? It will have a total impact on our agricultural economy. Last, we are in the point of recovery and repopulation. And I would like to engage with you on this. Please help us recover and repopulation. It starts with the right communication. It starts with the right material. It starts with the right understanding. And hopefully, hindi ko na to i-discuss yung ano yung mga requirements para maka-recover, ano yung requirements para mag-repopulate. It takes another whole seminar. But we have no choice but to recover. And it starts with biosecurity audits. I don't know if I'm open to discussing with you kung ano yung mga requirements to recover and repopulation. Ano yung mga learnings natin, ano yung adjustments sa backyard farm para hindi ulit tamaan, ano yung mga gagawin ng mga backyard farms, ano yung audit minimum biosecurity requirements sa mga commercial farms para lang maging shield ka na sa ASF if you want to recover, ano yung mga procedures, cleaning, disinfection, ano yung downtime requirements, ano yung sentinel requirements, no? Ano yung mga traceability controls natin, no? Ano yung adjustment natin sa the way we move our people, okay? And also the way we sell and organize our output, no? Yung mga viajero movements, saan lang dapat yung buying movement and delivery programs, dapat mag-adjust yan because we could not live backwards. Alam natin na susceptible na tayo the way we are doing things, the way our production flows are working. Ang laki ng gaps, kaya tayo napasukan. Pag hindi tayo natututo, then we will have another outbreak in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, because as you understand, mula nung outbreak sa PRRS, mula nung outbreak sa PED, ngayong outbreak ng African Swine Fever, mahirap nang idilang mga viruses. Hindi na pwedeng hausaw na biosecurity. Hindi na pwede yung sabi ni ganito, sabi ni ganyan. You have to have a complete audit and comply with the audits of a minimum biosecurity farm. Okay? Maraming salamat. Hopefully you understand the story. It's been a while. Natagalan tayo. But I know I have 5 questions from you, and kung kulang yung time natin sa ating 5 questions, um, I can answer some of your questions if it gets into my email. Maraming salamat. Daghanja mong salamat mga sano ug sana. There are 27 of us that's continually still patiently learning, and I am open for your questions.
So, yes. Sir, we actually have more than 5 questions. So, maraming mga gustong magtanong about ASF. So, let me just start with a question from Mr. Alan Tasik from New Era University Rizal. But I think you've already answered it naman. This is actually a question that was posted last Wednesday. So I'll just read it and maybe you can answer briefly since parang na-discuss mo na to kanina. So his question is, may gamot na po ba sa ASF or vaccine na magpapagaling sa mga baboy natin? O pag natamaan po ang baboy, ano ang dapat gawin?
Well, wala pang gamot. It's a viral disease, so wala pang antibiotics kasi it's a virus disease. So basically, we are waiting for an effective vaccine to come in. We're tracking, of course, there are news now that Vietnam is pinning on hopes dun sa na-develop nila, but we're looking at a more commercial available one siguro in the next 2 or 3 years. Hopefully, hindi man naabutan ng 5 years. And hopefully faster than that. Anong gagawin? I-report nyo kaagad. Pag tinamaan kayo, i-report nyo kaagad sa inyong LGU. And seek their support. That's the first, because they understand more. They might have their local policies and local guidelines that kasi iba naman yung, maaaring iba yung case mo sa Luzon, iba yung dynamics niyo sa Luzon. And your veterinarians would know better than probably me on a national scale. So report kaagad sa inyong mga LGU veterinarians and work with them, coordinate, and be transparent sa kanila para hindi kayo magkukos ng problema sa ibang mga baboy sa paligid natin.
Okay, yes. So thank you so much, Doc. So again, don't be afraid to report if ever your farm is infected with ASF. So now, Doc, let's move on to our second question. This is actually from a faculty of our very own faculty from Xavier University, from Engineer Elenito Duran. So he's asking, is there now a nationwide action plan to implement strict biosecurity measures among the backyard hog growers?
Yes, engineer. We just launched the Bantay sa ASF or Bantay sa Barangay, yung for ASF. It's actually it's a cohesive, inclusive program, not only doon sa pag-execute ng biosecurity, but yung border controls, no, within the towns, yung detection, diagnosis, and up to recovery and repopulation. So ang hope lang natin adapt the Bantay sa Barangay program. The more LGUs ang mag-adapt, the more na mas grassroots yung pag-execute ng ating Bantay sa Barangay na programa natin.
Thank you so much, Doc. Now, for our third question, is there a possibility that ASF here is here to stay, and are there any indications that the current ASF virus will mutate?
Parang COVID, no? Yes, it's possible. Well, to answer the first, is it here to stay? Alam nyo, FMD pa lang na-eradicate natin eh. So kung yung hog cholera nga, andito pa rin until decades, no? Ano pa kaya ang African Swine Fever? And you have to understand, 1930s pa ito, 1900s pa ito in Africa. Still, wala pang nakapag-eradicate, hindi pa ito na-eradicate sa Africa. Took them more than 30 years in many countries in Europe bago ito ma-eradicate. So, for the Philippines, I'm not naman pessimistic, but it will take really a grassroots program and a lot of education and really good vaccine para makontrol natin to. Hindi man ma-eradicate, but at least within herds and within population, within farms, makontrol natin itong African Swine Fever.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. So now for our fourth question. So someone is asking, are there locally developed treatment or protocol for ASF infected hogs? So like locally developed talaga ng mga protocols daw.
I mean protocols or supplements? You
Or
say
treatment
meaning
protocols.
protocols. Okay. I don't know if you're of any chemical material or herbal, kasi local eh. You're looking at supplementation coming from herbs or researches coming from any materials. Even globally, wala. May mga nagbibenta sa amin, kahit naman sa I work for a feeds company, no. May mga nagbibenta ng mga sinasabi nilang oils that will help daw improve immunity. But these are not peer reviewed na data, meaning it didn't go through scientific scrutiny and long-term evaluation. Maaring indirect, it doesn't really directly improve specific antigenic reactions or immunological reactions towards ASF, but general improvement of the immunity para hindi masyadong madaling tamaan yung ating mga baboy, not really specific for ASF. So hopefully kayong mga estudyante, kung may kwento ako about how I discovered my vaccine eh, but hindi yun dahil bright ko, no. Sometimes talaga mapipilitan lang tayo. So hopefully you would go into further studies, you would pursue graduate work and discover some research gaps on these medicines, no, on these supplements na makatulong towards control ng mga sakit natin, not only sa baboy but in any animals. That's something na challenging baka para sa inyo na mga bata pa and very idealistic.
Okay. Yes, so that is a challenge to our students who are watching, especially students from XU and to those animal science and vet med students. So I hope that you also get inspired from Doc Eugene's story as well, diba? So let's find that vaccine or that cure to ASF in the near future. Now, Doc, this is our second to the last question. So somebody is asking, is there a difference between commercial and native pigs in terms of ASF infection? And if there is, which breed is more resilient to ASF?
Meron akong, I don't know kung nakilala nyo si Cito Beltran. If you are, sorry ha, I'm not promoting, promote ko na rin BMEG. I host a BMEG show every Tuesdays. If you want, I host a Facebook Live on the Alagang BMEG page. And ang co-host ko doon ay si Mr. Cito Beltran. You probably know him in media. He's a media practitioner. And yung kanyang mga native pigs ay tinamaan. Nauna pang tinamaan yung kanyang mga native pigs kaysa dun sa kanyang mga commercial na mga baboy. So the question is, are the native pigs more susceptible? We don't have studies on that. But I'd like to infer that the wild boar population in Europe are characterized to more persistent in infection. No? They shed more and they don't die. No? They are shedders. I don't know if it has something to do with their wild genetics, as their resiliency as a wild in the wild population, but they just keep on shedding without really automatically dying. Unlike ng mga commercial na baboy natin na nakakahon, naka-gestating stalls, na yung mga unang tinamaan talaga, namamatay talaga sila kaagad. Mabilis yung kanilang mortality. So to the question, in the Philippines, wala pang studies kung mas susceptible ba ang native population compared to the commercial ones. Hopefully that's a good thesis study. Kung ating bang mga wild population sa Mindoro or dyan sa Mindanao, kung may mga wild population, are they more resistant or are they more resilient to the virus compared to our mga naka-herd na population natin? That's a good material for research.
Okay. And now for our last question, are there other swine viruses to watch out that are as deadly or deadlier than ASF?
Always. When I was doing my graduate studies at the University of Minnesota, we always are looking for disease X or disease Y. Well, joke namin na para makakuha tayo ng fundings, okay? But we all know that pag ahead tayo sa research, especially in the developing mga cell lines, no? If we could develop cell line, I'm talking of viruses, no? If we could develop cell line faster than what our performance was with ASF, mas madali kasi makagawa ng, mas madali makapag-aral ng mga diseases. So, I'm not saying naman na yes, marami pang sakit na darating, but the way our population dynamics, our ecosystem has been changing, mas marami namang sakit in the last century compared to the previous ones. And that's expected. The way, look at how COVID, di ba? Tinutuloy mo yung interaction ng mga, paano kinakain ng mga tao, yung mga dapat di kinakain ng mga hayop, di ba? So we are increasing our risks, the way we penetrate sacred ecosystems na dapat di natin pinipenetrate. That's really part of how we get all these unknown infections. And so the more that we are, the more that science has made easy to diagnose, the more na meron tayong makikita mga sakit. But with that reality, hopefully our inquisitive mind and our research philosophies and our quest for solutions is far greater than those possibilities, so that we'll be one step ahead of those realities.
Okay. So thank you so much, Doc. So yes, that's right. So we must still always be vigilant, of course, because there are a lot of we will never know in the future. So what it will hold, maybe a new strain would come out. But again, as what Doc Eugene has said, we need to work so that we are one step ahead of whatever it may be. So now, Doc, for the last part of the program, we are going to ask you for a parting message for our audience. Of course, we have viewers from different sectors. We have students, we have government employees, and we also even have park retailers who are watching our live and who will watch it because they can rewatch it later. So any last message for them?
Una, thank you very much, Xavier University, for this invitation. Medyo na-depress ako last year from all these things going on with the ASF outbreak. May mga kilala tayo na na-depressed na mga owners ng farms. These are my friends. May mga backyard farms tayo, may mga nanay, may mga tatay tayo na has gone through depression because of ASF, and these are our customers, and we feel with them. We've been working hard. I think kung saan-saan yun ako nakikita, parang na nga akong nito eh. Paano ba? Parang na akong, hindi ba kayo nagsawa sa akin? In fact, I would have said no to this invitation kasi parang feeling ko parang naubos na yung boses ko, and I feel like I've been saying the same message of vigilance. But again, when I learned that I'll be speaking to students, I just knew that it's parang discipleship eh. You disciple the next generation of those who will solve the problem. And I know that with your young minds, you will probably impress and influence more. You will impress your parents, you will impress your neighbors, and the future of you will be the next BAI director, the next professors, the next farmers, and the next producers. So hopefully when I am able to influence your young minds, I am discipling future generation of agri-entrepreneurs and agri-economists and agri-specialists and agri-scientists. So maraming salamat. Hopefully I made a new contribution to your fertile minds today. But I still would like to throw this challenge of, again, continually, dahil estudyante kayo, hindi kayo necessarily farmers eh. Continually have that inquisitive mind, have that critical thinking in you, na wag lang ma-settle down with what's going on, but help find solutions. And use your voice to educate, use your voice to inform, and be a voice of change in the way things are doing. In the simplest thing as nagpapakain ng pasaw-lamaw ng mga silingan ninyo. In the simplest thing as yung mga biyahero na nanggagago ng mga kapitbahay niyo magbababoy. Start conversing with them. Start teaching your farmers, and in your own little way, you can also make change. You don't have to be Eugene Mende with this platform. You just have to be a good neighbor, a good student, a good human being. Maraming salamat po.